Welcome and thank you for joining us for the East Mediterranean Business Cultural Alliance, EMBCA's 570th anniversary commemoration of the fall of Constantinople webinar panel discussion. My name is Lou Katsos, EMBCA's president, and I will be co-moderating this discussion with Marina, Belessis, Casoria, EMBCA's executive vice president. Marina is the president of Ideas Unlimited, a creative development consultant at the intersection of communications, strategy, programming, and resource development for social good, philanthropy, and impact investing. Marina served as a member of the public affairs team at Con Edison, managed corporate responsibility, philanthropy, strategic partnerships, government, and community affairs. She is a certified fundraising executive and holds a CFRE international credential in fundraising management with over 25 years of experience working with nonprofit organizations. She has helped to fundraise over $50 million for nonprofit organizations with a focus on social services for children and families in need. Her experience in strategic partnership includes education, environment, workforce, and economic development, arts and culture, civic and community, ethnic and religious communities. Marina was a founding board member of ELPIDES, Greek Women Helping Greek Women, dedicated to supporting victims of family violence. Her community service includes membership to the boards of numerous organizations, including Opportunities for a Better Tomorrow, the Dodge YMCA, the Brooklyn Center for Performing Arts at Brooklyn College, and Hope Program Business Advisory Council. She serves on the EMBCA Board of Directors as Executive Vice President of the East Mediterranean Business Culture Alliance, and she holds a master's degree in Science and Organizational Leadership and Congressional Citation awarded by Congresswoman Caroline Maloney for outstanding efforts and invaluable contributions to the United States of America. Welcome, Marina, and thank you for co-moderating this event.
Thank you, Lou. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for all you do for the future of Hellenism. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marina. Our highly distinguished panelists for this unique historical discussion today includes the Honorable Petros Doukas, the Mayor of Sparta, Dr. Constantine Hatzidimitriou, Adjunct Assistant Professor at St. John's University and City University of New York, Professor Dr. Johannes Niehoff-Panagiotidis of the Free University of Berlin, Professor Ilias Yerenis of Ionian University, and author, poet, Professor Nicholas Alexiou at Queens College, and also the director of the Hellenic, American Hellenic Project. The fall of Constantinople, also known as the conquest of Constantinople, on Tuesday, May 29, 1453, after a 53-day siege, was a seminal event in world history in the late Middle Ages and effectively marked the end of the last remnants of the Roman Empire, later called the Byzantine or the East Roman Empire, that amazingly lasted nearly 1,500 years. Among many historians, the fall of Constantinople is considered the end of the medieval period, as well as the turning point in military history. The exodus of many of the Hellenes to what later became Italy as a result of this event marked also the beginning of the Western Renaissance. Constantinople, the new Rome, had been the Roman imperial capital since the consecration in 330 under Constantine the Great, and later named after him. Although the city was besieged many times until its fall 11 centuries later in 1453, it was captured only once before during the Fourth Crusade in 1204, when a Latin state was formed and the remainder of the empire splintered into a number of successor states, including Nicaea, Epirus, and Trebizond. The successor states fought as allies against the Latin establishments, but also fought among themselves for the East Roman Byzantine throne. Although the Nicaeans eventually reconquered Constantinople from the Latins in 1261, reestablishing the East Roman Byzantine Empire under the Palaiologos dynasty, there was little peace as the weakened empire fought off successive attacks by the Latins, Serbs, Bulgarians, and Ottoman Turks. And was further weakened between 1346 and 1349 by the Black Death that killed almost half the population of Constantinople, further depopulation by the general economic and territorial decline that ensued, as well as the internal religious strife as a result of the agreements from the Council of Florence in 1439 with the Latin West. By 1450, the empire had shrunk to a few square kilometers outside the city Constantinople itself, the Princess Islands, in the Sea of Marmara, and the Peloponnesus with its cultural center at Mistras. The empire of Trebizond, an independent successor state that formed after the aftermath of the Fourth Crusade, was also present at the time on the coast of the Black Sea. The city conquest by Sultan Mehmed II and the defeat of the vastly outnumbered Roman Byzantines and the death of Constantine, the Emperor Constantine, the 11th Palaiologos, marked the end of the empire, although the Moria, Trebizond, Theodoro, and Epirus continued as Byzantine remnant states until their conquests in 1460, 1461, 1475, and 1479, respectively. After conquering the city, Mehmed made Constantinople the new Ottoman Empire, or capital, and part of his empire. This event today is presented in the memory of Dr. Marios Philippidis, who passed away last year on December 27 and was emeritus professor in the Department of Classics at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. He published, among other things, many articles and books relating to the fall of Constantinople, including his monumental 2011 study, The Siege and Fall of Constantinople in 1453. I'd like to start now with our first panelist and presenter, and then we're going to open it up after all the presentations into a general panel discussion. I have the honor of presenting Dr. Constantine Hatzidimitriou, Adjunct Assistant Professor at St. John's University and the University of New York. Dr. Hatzidimitriou was born in New York and holds a PhD from Columbia University in Byzantine, Ottoman, and Balkan history. While in Athens as a Gennadius fellow, he discovered the lost manuscript of the Chronicle of Galaxidi, and while there became the educational counselor of the U.S. Consulate and Fulbright office in Thessaloniki, also the headmaster of Anatolia College's English Language Center, and served as an assistant professor at the American College. Later back in the US, he was an assistant to the dean, director of admissions, and director of grants development office at LaGuardia Community College at CUNY. Among his numerous awards and citations include Hellenic Educator of the Year, 2 Queensborough President citations for excellence in community education, an NEH fellowship recognition by President Clinton for his contributions to scholarship in the history of Greek-American relations, and the Distinguished Social Studies Educator Award from the Greater Metropolitan Social Studies Association in New York. He is also the author of 2 books, American Accounts Documenting the Destruction of Smyrna, and Founding on Freedom and Virtue, documents illustrating the impact in the United States of the Greek War of Independence. In addition to his many scholarly journals in the field of Byzantine and modern Hellenic history and education, he has taught at Columbia University, the New School of Social Research, Bank Street College, St. John's University, the University of Thessaloniki, and various CUNY colleges. Welcome, Constantine, and thank you for being with us.
Too long an introduction. You found it online. The first 2 lines would have been enough.
I love these long introductions because you're great. Let's go.
I'm going to try to share my screen. Hopefully I'll be successful. Trying to find the PowerPoint. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we see it. We got it.
Okay. Hopefully it's not too long, Lou.
It'll be like your introduction.
The presentation, as Lou mentioned, is in memory of my dear friend and colleague Marios Philippidis, Eonia Imnimi. Marios passed away on December 27th, as was previously mentioned. He devoted the major part of his scholarly output to the fall of Constantinople. These are some of his major works: translation and study of Francis. He did the Chronicle of the Turkish Sultans translation. He annotated and did a study along with his colleague Hannick, the Tale of Constantinople by Nestor Iskander. He collected a whole bunch of sources around Mehmed II and the same period. And this monumental study that he did on the fall is over 800 pages. It's not a narrative study or a narrative of the fall itself. It's a discussion of all of the sources and even the geography of the fall. And then he did also a study of another eyewitness, Cardinal Isidore. And finally, his last work was on Constantine Palaiologos, which I'm drawing from for this presentation. It's the closest thing that we have to what he would have written as a narrative of the siege itself and the fall. It was his last work. I'm sure if he had lived, he would have completed that. Mario and I go back to the 1980s. I was at the International Byzantine Studies Conference in Venice this past summer, and Mario was on the preliminary program. He was going to be presenting, and I looked for him and didn't find him. And I should have called him when I got back, but I didn't. And I discovered that he passed away the following December. So obviously that's why he was not at the conference. I guess he took his illness of long-standing took a turn for the worse. He was a very generous scholar, very supportive of myself and everyone else, and his output was just really there's no one like him in terms of the siege. He went through all of the sources, and he with the limitation of Ottoman, he had to do the Ottomans, whatever we have, like Tuisun Beg and so on, in translation. And he dealt with the Slavic sources with Walter's assistance. But he really sifted through everything. And he was one of a kind. And it's a real loss that he didn't live to give us a new narrative day by day, hour by hour of the siege. It would have been something that would last. But his numerous articles as well. Now, I'm very much honored that that Lou allowed us to dedicate this program to him. And also, I feel very honored to be on the same panel with two such distinguished Byzantinists. Professor Yerenis's work on the last grids is fundamental. He's done something recently, I think, on Metochites. And of course, Professor Panagiotidis, he's going to give us the earliest Ottoman documents based on the archives of Mount Athos. So really, it's an honor for me to be, on an online discussion with such distinguished individuals. I have not done work on the siege, but what I'm going to talk about are three items. And now all of these pictures are going to interfere with my text. Let me see if I can put it here on the bottom. Good. Okay. I want to talk about three items that are related to 1453 and Marios Philippidis. First, there's archaeological evidence published by Dr. Angelarakis of Delphi University, another friend and a colleague who, thank God, is still with us, concerning the Byzantine defenders of Fort Polystilon, ancient Abdera, in Thrace, who refused to surrender and died fighting the Ottomans in the 1380s. And then I'm going to talk about briefly Constantine Palaiologos' liberation of Central Greece from Ottoman rule in connection with the Crusade of Varna in 1443, 1444, based on my study of the Chronicle of Alexiou, which Lou was kind enough to mention, Chalcocondylis and Themises, Doukas, Syriacus of Ancona, and my discussions with Marios. Finally, I want to discuss summarize some observations that Dr. Philippidis made concerning the siege based on his works. Just some bullets. Without further ado, and how are these all related to Mario? Well, the last time we were together, Dr. Angelarakis and I, and we were at a Byzantine Studies conference together where we gave papers, and that was actually the last time that I saw him in the Byzantine Studies Association of America conference, and we discussed these various items. So some aspects in general about the situation in the Morea and Thrace before 1453. Constantinople is surrounded. The Ottomans are expanding into Central Europe. Research has shown that Ottoman methods of conquest were effective, very effective. If you surrendered, it was greatly to your advantage. I have the classic study in mind of Inalcek, Ottoman methods of conquest. Despite the many renegade Byzantines joined them, and Byzantine civil wars took a toll, a terrible toll. And Molly Green, in her recent survey of the Turkokratia, dates the Turkokratia, unlike most works who are dated since 1453. She really dates it to the 14th century and Evrinos Beg's conquest of Thrace. Byzantium also failed to fully exploit Tamerlane, Timur the Lame's defeat of the Ottomans in 1403 and the elimination of Bayezid. This unity and failure took a substantial toll, and no aid really of great substance came from the West. The Crusade of Varna was in January 1st, 1443, and ultimately failed. The Ottomans defeated them. Future Constantine Palaiologos, the despot in Mistra, he fortified the Examilion and hoped to block the Ottoman advance into the Morea, and he planned a move into central Greece, which Syriacus of Ancona also provides information about, because Syriacus of Ancona was actually gathering information. He was kind of a spy, going around and going through Ottoman lines, and he interacted. He's fascinating. For a long time, you couldn't get at his material, but Father Bodnar has given us a translation of his letters and his diaries. It's really a tremendous resource and gives a lot of information on this period. He knew the emperor, he knew Constantine personally, he even knew Chalkokondylis, and he moved all over the region. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is Polystichon Abdera, which Angelorakis has done archaeology. He's a forensic archaeologist and a Byzantinist, and he studied the graves there. You see on the map where it's located. It's close to Katsos, and it's based on his work and the work that Dr. Barkizis from the Euphoria did between 81 and 95. 45 Byzantine tombs were investigated, dating from the 6th century to the 14th century. 60 skeletal remains were found, and it gives us an idea of how people lived at the time from the 7th century until the 14th. So it's actually 6th century, it says there. The period of Gazi Everenos Beg, he conquered the area of Polystichon, and at that time, by that time, the city had declined to such an extent that there was a fortified area that existed, a kind of a fort. That's why I call it a Byzantine Alamo. Earlier, Manuel Katakouzinos had strengthened the fort's defenses, but the skeletons show that by this time, the inhabitants were malnourished. They were cut off in dire circumstances. In fact, the skeletal remains show that they were shorter than people who had lived there previously, and that the veterans had suffered various wounds and that had to be healed. And yet they refused to surrender and defied the Ottomans until the very end. I'm going to talk about one grave that was found of a decapitated Byzantine defender, the cranial evidence. It was found in that's the fort there that you can see in the slide, and this is the head, which was found in another grave, which is it was in a child's grave, which is important. Site C is where it was found. And what happened was that the decapitated head was found in the child's grave, and it certainly was buried there in secret. And as we know, one of the things that was done was when people resisted, of course, the leadership, if not everybody who fought against the Ottomans, would be killed and decapitated, and their remains were usually fed to the dogs or abused in some way. They were not allowed a decent burial. It was a way of intimidating anybody who thought to resist the conquerors. And the theory is that the head of this particular defender, possibly the leader, was collected and buried in secret in another grave with a child. Here you see a reconstruction of the skull and an artistic reconstruction of the decapitated head. So the bones of these resistors tell their story of their heroism. They held out for a long period of time. Angelorakis has written 3 very detailed articles with all of the sources on Polystichon and the resistance. And I was just so impressed by this that that's why I included it, in addition to the fact that we talked about it with Marios at that Byzantine Studies Conference. And perhaps the good Yerenis, the good professor, will find some documents, Ottoman documents related to Polystichon, because we were not able to find, Angelorakis was not able to locate any Ottoman sources. And there's a dissertation that I'm sure the scholars here are familiar with on Thrace, and none are mentioned in that dissertation as well. Moving along, I've done some work on Cyriacus of Ancona, and Cyriacus, what he describes in 1443 is what happens to people who resist. And I quote, "I have witnessed the wretched state of the Greeks and of various peoples of our own faith who could express in words their vile massacre or shed tears equal to their pain. For on numerous occasions we saw Christians, boys as well as unmarried girls, and masses of married women of every description paraded pitiably by the Turks in long lines throughout the cities of Thrace and Macedonia, bound by iron chains and lashed by whips, and in the end put up for sale in villages and markets like cattle." End of quote. So Palaiologos in 1444 decides that he is going to invade central Greece, and maybe as a diversionary tactic to take some Ottoman troops away from the Crusaders at Varna. That didn't happen. Marios thought that the invasion was less important than I do. We discussed it. It is described in great detail in his book on Palaiologos. Kalkokondylis, who was there at the time, he was at Mistra. He writes about this, that Constantine, he made preparations to fortify the isthmus and incited the inhabitants of the region outside of the Peloponnese to secede from the Sultan. He occupied Boeotia and took over the city of Thebes. All of Boeotia came under his control, and even the tyrant of Athens pledged to pay tribute to him and concluded a treaty. He also occupied Mount Pindos, which is inhabited by the Vlachs. Lidorikion, the town in the territory of the Locrians, and the inhabited region of Pindos by the city of Phanarion, received a lord from the despot. End of quote. Chronicle of Galaxidi, much later document that I'm preparing a new edition of based on my study of the manuscript, translation, and a annotation of, records the following. It's a document from 1703, but has very interesting details and lots of reliable information. My thesis is that the information is compiled from enthymesis and short chronicles. These are manuscript notations that were put down by monks at the time. So I think that Ephthemios, the author of the chronicle, found these in the monastery in Galaxidi, and that's where he derives his information from. It spans a very long chronological period from the 10th century until the 17th. So what he says is a Turk by the name of Trilembe ruled Lidoriki, Galaxidi, and the other areas near Apakto when hostilities broke out between the Romei and the Turks, and the Romei then killed quite a few of their renegades, calls them Zorbades, who were cruel and vicious. Cyriacus adds that one of the coastal towns in central Greece during the invasion was named after Constantine's general, a fellow also called Constantine, and Kantakousinos, who was then, they renamed the town Kantakousinopolis in his honor. All of it, unfortunately, was for naught, and Murad II stormed the Examilion, the wall that Constantine reinforced, and reconquered the area in 1446. This is a copy of the chronicle. This is what the manuscript looks like. It's very faded and difficult to read. I had to use ultraviolet light to deal with it. And I received substantial help at the time from Linos Politis and John C. Alexander, who loaned me his ultraviolet machine to be able to do that. Here you see a map of central Greece. And now I'm just going to talk about a couple of observations that Philippidis makes about the siege based on his tremendous work. And this is the large tome, and this is his work on Constantine. Some insights. He shows with very convincing documentation that Constantine was never officially crowned, neither in Mistra nor in Constantinople. He probably was acclimated in Mistra, and there may have been some kind of a ceremony, but there was no official coronation. He goes through the sources. He was also unmarried in 1453. According to Mario, a severe lack of funds impacted on the defense, manpower, and Urban's desertion to the Turks. He simply didn't have Urban was working for the Byzantines, and he deserted and made those tremendous cannons because Constantine and the Byzantines didn't have enough money to pay him. And the people of Constantinople were in dire straits. Starvation was rampant, and it impacted on the defense in a number of ways. Venice had the imperial jewels that the Byzantines had hocked to them. Yet, when during the siege, what Mario mentions is, if you go through his notes, that some nobles had hoards of money that the Ottomans found and that are reported. So there was money, it just wasn't all made available as it should have been. And the West, of course, didn't send substantial financial aid. They were also unable, because of this lack of manpower, to defend the inner and outer walls. One of the points that he makes is that Constantinople was designed strategically to have 3 walls. They could only defend the outer walls properly because they lacked the manpower, and so the breach occurred, and there weren't enough people to do a proper job, although they really gave a heroic effort. The other point that Marios Philippidis makes is that the withdrawal of Justiniani and the Genoese during the final day of the siege was critical to the final assault. The fact that he withdrew, and he says that there's good evidence that the emperor tried to convince him not to leave, but he was wounded at least twice, and was in dire straits. And he really ran the defense because he and the Genoese were experts, as Mario documents, on defending cities. And this information about the assault gate, the Kekorpota, may have been left open, but it's not the cause of the conquest, as you always read in a lot of popular accounts, that somebody left the, it could be that it was left open deliberately, or likely that some group went out and never returned. But what Mario gives information on is that, yes, the Turks came in, but immediately they were slaughtered. So the impact was psychological. The Turks that entered were killed, he says about 100, based on the sources that he has. But the psychological impact was terrible because of the height of that area, where the Turks could be seen in various parts of the city. And then by the time they were killed, people thought that the city had already fallen. The Byzantines, according to him, almost turned back that final assault. And if not for Justiniani's being wounded, they may have prevailed on that particular day. Although long term, obviously the city was doomed. And panic followed the Genoese flight, and the emperor died fighting like a common soldier. There are no witnesses. A body was later found, according to some sources, and shown to Mehmed, and they say it was his because of the boots. But there's no grave, despite what's said. There was no. Again, Mario says that there was no great speech or liturgy held in the last days at Saint Sophia. It doesn't make sense. Everybody was busy defending the city, and the emperor could have left, remained behind, despite all the myths of that he survived. He became a heroic figure. It's like Lancelot, not Lancelot, King Arthur. He compares him to, and it's to his eternal credit that he didn't leave. I hope I didn't take too much time. Those are the main points. I'm sure that our distinguished colleagues and panelists will have more to say on all of these items. Eonia, to my old friend, and I will always miss him and cherish all of his scholarship and his works. Lou, I seem to have lost my audio. Can you hear me?
I can hear.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay, no problem. I mean, don't forget that we do know that he turned into marble, basically, and is waiting for
Right.
the city to be taken over again.
He's waiting, right?
He's waiting to come out. Marina, would you like to introduce our next panelist, Professor Dr. Panagiotidis?
Yes, of course. Professor Dr. Johannes Niehoff-Panagiotidis of the Freie Universität Berlin is a Byzantine scholar since 2007, a professor of Byzantine studies in the Institute for Greek and Latin Philology at the Free University in Berlin. Yerenis was born in Recklinghausen, Germany, to an Istanbul Hellenic family. After receiving a classical education, he enrolled at the University of Tübingen for classics, linguistics, and Oriental studies. After his Master's of Arts in Iranian personal names in 1986, he completed his PhD on the development of the Hellenic language from Roman to modern Greek times. His habilitation postdoctoral qualification was on Hellenic and Old Spanish versions of Kalila wa Dina, 1998. He has been a professor or visiting professor at the University of Tübingen, Freiburg University, University of Mainz, Germersheim, Faculty of Translation Studies at the Central European University of Budapest from 2007 to 2009, Free University of Berlin, Institute of Greek and Latin Philology, and Vice Dean of the Department of Philosophy and Humanities from 2007. Free University of Berlin, Institute of Greek and Latin Philology as Professor of Byzantine Studies. His funded research projects and awards are many and include the 2021-22 German Orient Institute, Istanbul, guest professor for a research project on the oldest Ottoman documents preserved on Mount Athos, now a book with the editor, 2019-2020, German Orient Institute, Istanbul, guest professor for a research project on Karamanlidika, which appeared as a blog. He is the author of numerous articles and books and has been an academic advisor. Since 2015, he has taught regular courses on Greek theology and its Arabic translations in the University of Qom, Iran, in Farsi. And he has been a principal investigator together with Dr. Belessis on a DFG-funded project on climate history of Byzantium in Macedonia, and Turkey, Scalofrag. At the Max Planck Institute in Jena. Since 2018, he has been an editor of the series on late antique Christianity with Gorgias Press in London, and has also continued to teach courses in classical and Byzantine Greek, and we can go on. Please help me welcome Dr. Niehoff-Panagiotidis. Thank you, Dr. Panagiotidis, for being with us at EMBCA.
I think he has to be unmuted.
Now it
Yeah.
works. Yeah. No, thank you a lot for the introduction. Thank you very much for the invitation. It is a good feeling to see Louis Katsos again, for an equilibrated voice in all this. I have 3 points to make. The first is the impact of the fall of Constantinople on our modern Greek consciousness. There is a famous book by Michael Herzfeld, Ours Once More, which is the famous citation from Palindikiamas Thane. And how much modern Greek culture is in the shadow of this fatal date, 29 May. And I will try to show it to you on the other way around. If you look on the impact of lost empires for nation building and modern statehood, you will see easily that it is not an easy heritage. You can begin with Austria, which lost their empire, and one of the worst products ever of this sense of losing a world empire was Adolf Hitler. You see the British, who lost their empire too. And I will not cite all the many British politicians who try to reinstall somehow this lost empire. And you can also talk about Russia. Russia never got rid about the Byzantine heritage. No, in this, I don't mean cultural or religious heritage, I mean political. The reinstitution of a world empire. Not to reassemble the Russian lands, which the Russians did in the 15th century, and they are doing it now again. The Russians conquered Ukraine 3 times, to be honest. Reassembling, this is a religiously or motivated irredentism. And even modern Turkey. No, I'm not the only one who thinks that modern politics from Turkey in Turkey is not so much the heir of Atatürk's break with the Ottoman past, but trying to reinstall a sultanic dominance over the region, which is very dangerous. But in modern Greece, it is completely different. The shock of 1453 was so heavy that only that on the long run, this sense of deep loss of an empire led to the establishment of the modern Greek democracy. You had in the beginning of Icosiena, you have always this dream of reconquering Constantinople, which ended, as you know, in the disaster of Izmir in 1922. Then finally, the majority of the Greek nation woke up that there is no way back to the empire, because today you are dealing with national states. The moment that you try to transform the memory of a lost empire into a national memory, you are lost. No, in the moment that you begin to reconquer an empire in a national sense of the word, you become an imperialist power who tries to expropriate culturally all the subjected people. And this for the Ottoman Empire would not be true. There is, on the day after the conquest, there is a firman by Mehmed the Conqueror, who puts all the Greek Orthodox under his personal protection. All the atrocities, with Professor Hatzidimitriou and others mentioned, are true, but this is due to the Islamic law of conquest. In the moment that you give up, that you put down the arms, you are protected. You are zimmi. No, if you resist, then the only solution for Islamic law is death. No, so it's very interesting about this excavation. No? And we know that Mehmed Fatih, shortly before beginning the final siege of Constantinople, sent a delegation to Constantine the 11th and asked them for giving up. No, to say it in Islamic law, the legal terminology, to make an aman, no, to make a armistice and to give up, and then they would have been no siege of Constantinople. No, all these heroic deeds, no, which is, one should mention that Giustiniani acted on his own account, because the Superba Repubblica of Genoa gave permission to all her subjects to participate, but did not help, not even with a pence, with a penny. Giustiniani worked on his own account and by his own free will, heroically, beyond any doubt. And Venice did not help at all. No, Konstantinos Palaiologos sent a delegation of ships or an escadron to look for a Venetian fleet to come to help, and nothing came. So in a certain sense, this deep loss, the tragic death of the emperor and so on, was also the chance of modern Greece to reconstitute as a state. I don't mean as a culture or as religion, a new state, which is the modern Greek state. And this is the only democracy in the Near East. And with no apartheid system and nothing. And and Greece is not an irredentist state today. So this is the first point. The next point is the role of the Orthodox Church. And this one should keep in mind that what happened in 1453 was not at all something new. Beginning with the Islamic conquest, every century, bigger parts of the Roman Orthodox population came under Islamic rule. No, these are the today Roman Orthodox in Egypt, in Syria, in Palestine. Also, there are many Roman Orthodox in Turkey who are not Greek, the people from Antiochia, from Antakya. They speak Arabic. No, of course, they are Rome, but they are not Greeks. But this historical, even in Iraq, you have some of them. And of course, the Karamanli, so the main point is that a Rome Orthodox majority, minority, depends, lived in all Islamic countries, conquered piece by piece by the Ottomans. And by Islamic law, by the Sharia, the Christians enjoy a state of protection. This is called in Arabic dhimma. And this group is exclusively religiously defined, not ethnically. The Ottoman state was not an ethnic state. It was not even a Turkish state. It was a religiously, Islamically constituted state by the idea that God has given to the dynasty of the Ahle Osman the rule over the world. No, so it is so the Orthodox Church, not because you have Orthodox churches all over the Islamic world. You have Orthodox in Egypt, you have them in Sudan, you have St. Catherine Monastery, which was mentioned. John of Damascus was not a Greek. John of Damascus was from Damascus, living in Islamic time. He never entered the Byzantine Empire. He was a Zimmi, he was a Rome Orthodox. Of course, he knew Greek. If you ever heard a Rome Orthodox bishop in Syria, how beautifully they speak Greek, very beautifully. No, but as foreigners, no, they speak so perfectly Greek that you understand that they are foreigners. No, and this is the experience the Orthodox Church knew. And first of all, the monks. They knew if you want to survive in this region of the world, you have to get arranged with the Muslims. You can act like the Venetians and the Genoese. No, then you fight bravely in Thessaloniki. No, after the first siege of Thessaloniki, Thessaloniki was a Venetian city for 30 years. The Venetians ruined the city economically while the population wanted to surrender. But anyway, and when it became critical, the Venetians took their ships and went home to the Serenissima and left the poor Greeks to the knives of the conquerors. So it's clear that the Orthodox Church, first of all, the monks of Mount Athos, did what they did. They say, we know that our brethren in Antiochia, Damascus, Sinai, found an arrangement with the Muslims, so we will do just the same. Oh. And militarily, the situation, but this has been pointed out by Professor Hatzidimitriou, is the situation was for a Byzantine Empire was desperate, but not by fault of the Ottomans, but mostly by fault of the, as Louis Katsos has said, by fault of the Fourth Crusade. You had 3 or 4 empires or reigns or realms which were fighting against each other. So what? This would be of no avail. And those who profited from the situation were the Venetians and the Genoese. The Genoese and the Venetians kept up Constantinople for another 100 years for doing traffic with Russia between Crimea. If anybody of you has ever traveled to Crimea, it is full of Genoese castles. So Pera Genoese was the place where Crimea was administered. This could sound to you somehow about modern politics, couldn't it? No, doing traffic with Crimea is always very profitable. So and the last point, the Ottomans, by doing what they did, they preserved Byzantine culture inside Ottoman culture. This for Greeks today is very difficult to understand because we are used to think in national categories. But this for the Ottomans had no national categories. The religious to a certain degree, though Mehmed Fatih Sultan was a Hurufi, but anyway, but they wanted Orthodox Greek culture inside the Ottoman Empire. And this is what they did. They had also Italian colonies, Armenian colonies, whatever. Now, it is not tolerance in our modern sense of the American Declaration of Independence, but it is accepting cultural diversity under the rule of the Sultan. This has nothing to do with Atatürk's state. It is very difficult to understand this. If you want to understand the Ottoman Empire, the closest parallel is the Austrian Empire, where German, of course, was the leading language, but it was not a German empire. No, this is what I had to say. So the best thing is you can do if you want to study this, is that you investigate the interaction between the Greek Orthodox Church and the Ottoman state, not the Turkish state. There was no Turkish state at this time. And this is also the question of the Karamanlides. The Karamanlides did exactly the same like the Rome Orthodox in the Arabic countries or wheresoever did too. They adopted the Turkish language, but they remained Christian and they were writing Turkish in Greek characters. No, and this is actually what the Roman Orthodox Arabs and all the others did centuries before. This is a repetition of a historical experience, typically for the Near East. The Roman Orthodox in the Arabic countries, they are Arabs. But of course, they have a strong tie to Byzantium, no, of course, but not to Greekishness. Oh, this is what I mainly had to say.
What happened to Yanni?
Nothing happened. This is what I had to say.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Let me ask you a question, because we didn't touch on it. But obviously the modern patriarchate was established by Mehmed II. Okay, and the acceptance of the first patriarch again, and he fashioned himself. I'm talking about Mehmed now as the new king of Rome, or whatever we want to call it. Now, he obviously knew that there was religious strife taking place within the city. The city, as we said, was depopulated. We talk about the great battles, this and that, the taking over the city, but the city was hollow by that time. Am I incorrect in this?
Now, yeah, you are correct, Luis. No, this is actually, some people know this better than me. They estimate 40,000 inhabitants for the city at this time. And even before the fall of the city, there were a lot of Ottoman spies inside the city. And there was even a mosque.
Right, and not only that, but basically within the city itself, there were people who were not necessarily in support of Constantine. Am I wrong on this? In other words, because of what took place, as we indicated earlier, the Council of Florence, etc.
Yeah, sure.
There was in fact division within the population itself, and the army, or the great army of Mehmed. Didn't it also include many Christians?
Yeah, mostly Serbians. No, the Serbian despotate. Actually, Constantine, it's completely true what Professor Hatzidimitriou said. Constantine remained unmarried because Mara Brankovic refused to marry him. And instead, Mara Brankovic married Murat II. So she became the Amirisa. So she was Mehmed's stepmother. And we have a document which is kept in Topkapi Saray. And I saw a photo, and it's difficult to get access because it is in Topkapi Saray. It's a letter by Mehmed the Conqueror to his beloved mother, Azize, Anemin, and so on, where he gives the church and the monastery of Hagia Sophia in Selanik, in Thessaloniki, to Mara Brankovic. So this is a Muslim sultan who bestows a whole waqf, so a wakufi, a pious foundation, to his Christian stepmother. And she was the daughter of the famous Vuk Brankovic. So the Serbians were officially the allies of the Ottomans, and they fought together with them. Again, he also conquering Constantinople. We have the memory.
Let me ask you just one final question. We'll go to the next presenter. There was always the question of whether the, as we said, if you allowed them to take over, let's say, you don't have 3 years of 3 days of looting and all the rest.
Exactly. Yeah. You call this Aman.
Right. So one of the things that is fascinating to me has to do with the religious people at the time, whether in fact they gave up or they were conquered. Okay. The aspect was, from what I've read, that they in fact did not fight. They in fact went along. Am I wrong on this or no?
No, I'm just writing the Arabic words for this into the chat. This is the difference between Fatr. Fatr means conquest. This is Arabic. In
Right.
Turkish, you would say Fetr, but this is now not so important. And Aman. Aman is what we say in Greek today, Aman Aman. This means truth, no pisti, no. And if you surrendered by Aman, you had no problems at all. You paid a tax, and that was it. Not charatzi, as Greeks normally say. No, for example, we know 2 or 3 cities which were taken by Aman and who had a completely different faith. The first city is Yanina. Yanina was conquered shortly before Constantinople. And as we know, it was just occupied by Aman. So until the rebellion of Skilosophos, no, Christians could settle inside the castle of Yanina. No problem with them. This is also the precondition of Ali Pasha. No, and another city with the same fate, which was taken over probably by the grandfather of, according to tradition of St. John of Damascus, was Damascus itself. So you have still a strong Christian quarter in Damascus, Bab-Tuma. And the third city, this is not so clear because we are lacking evidence, was probably Athens. Athens was not taken by violence as far as we know. It is not so clear. We have the Fethir Jami, yeah, no, but probably not very much happened in Athens. So it was your decision, no, what you did. But by majority, no, the Orthodox Church was in favor of making a compromise.
And there was there's been a recent argument about that, by the way, because and the discussions of this particular thing. And I apologize for spending time on this, but the church is basically saying they were in fact did that compromise, and in fact they were guaranteed certain things that right now in modern Turkey that they're saying in fact that there was never such a compromise. Am I wrong on this or no?
Now, this is now, again, as usual, the object of political strife, and this is always dangerous. No, it is clear that, for example, Constantinople was taken by Fetr, by conquest. No, but Gennadios Folarios wanted the compromise. And you know, the structure of the Orthodox Church, you know this better than me, is different from the Catholic Church. In the Orthodox Church, actually, everybody does what he wants. No, they don't have even a unified calendar, as you know. So for answering this topic, you should go to a local level. We have even from the 14th century a bishop in Thrace, by the way, close to Polystilo, but a bit more to the north. It's actually close to Soufli. A bishop who collaborated with the Ottomans, and he opened the gates of the city to get the city conquered to spare his people. No, then they made a trial for him in Constantinople, which the acts are preserved, and so on and so on. But it is it is a question. In modern times, the contemporary Greeks discredit the church in saying you were traitors and you collaborated with the Ottomans. But what was the alternative? If you do heroic resistance, you risk that they kill half of your population. Or you survive inside an Islamic system, which may be hard. No, but then at least you survive. And one thing you should keep in mind, that the Ottoman Empire of the 15th century is not the anarchic state of the 18th century, which was fallen apart into different provinces with Ali Pasha and all these others. It was quite a well-ruled state as far as we can see. No, and Haraj is not what we say today in Greek with Haratzi. Haraj is a regular tax. by the way, a real estate tax for ground. No, so
Okay.
actually, I have no final solution. The only thing what I can recommend is that more Greeks should learn Ottoman and more Turks should learn Greek.
Well, one of the things that fascinates me is what happened when they were starting to take the churches and converting them into mosques. And there was that whole discussion whether the church, in fact, surrendered or not. And I think they brought some old men, because Mehmet was not around at the time. There were some old men, and there was that whole argument. And the old men basically, who knows what happened, but they confirmed that in fact it was a surrender and not the other way around.
Yeah, this is exactly what happened. No, the patriarchate falsified in the Jano delam injol man hichi dynamisch navam. No, the patriarchate falsified in the 16th century, declaring Constantinople as being conquered by Amman in order to keep the churches. No, so no, they say the Ottomans did not keep their promises. This is unfortunately true, but the church also falsified documents, no, and saying it was taken by Amman, so you cannot take it away from us. In fact, the Ottoman government behaved as if Constantinople would have been taken by Amman, because at the first 100 years, they left them normally their churches.
Fascinating discussion.
The church of the Holy Apostles was destroyed by an earthquake, not by the Ottomans.
Fascinating discussion, and obviously we can't spend more time on this, but this is very fascinating. Our next presenter is Professor Ilias Yerenis of Ionian University. Ilias was born in Athens. He is a Byzantinist, professor of Byzantine intellectual history at the Ionian University. He is also vice rector of the university. He has written on the Empire of Nicaea, on the Empire of Trebizond, on the fragmented Byzantine world after 1204, on the Holy Face, and on the Byzantine author and clergyman Nikolaos Mezaritis. He has co-edited various collections, volumes on the scholar and Cardinal Bessarion, and on scholars and scholarship in Byzantium. He has also co-edited the honorary volume Books and Learning in the Byzantine World in honor of Professor Kostas Konstantinidis. He has taken part in many international congresses, colloquia, and conferences in Greece, in Athens, Thessaloniki, Yanina, Corfu, Argostoli, Mistra, Sparta, Trikala, and Komotini. In Great Britain and London, Cyprus, in Nicosia and Paralimni. In Italy, in Venice and in Palermo. In Spain, in Salamanca and Marbella. In Croatia, in Pula. And Hungary, in Budapest. His current research interests include Byzantine scholarship and education, the world of manuscripts in Byzantium, and the reception of Byzantium in modern and contemporary Greece. Welcome, Ilya, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a great honor for me to take part in this important panel discussion organized by the EMBCA regarding this momentous event of the fall of Constantinople and organized in the memory of Marios Philippidis, who has produced so much on this subject. I'm really happy to be able to contribute to this dialogue among distinguished academics and who have also heard so many important things. And it's an opportunity for me to have a valuable feedback from all our participants on this issue, which undoubtedly bears a great historical importance. In my short contribution today, I'll try to show how to show some aspects of how the event of the fall had an impact of the collective memory of this very generation of the Byzantines who had to live in a totally differentiated world. The world after 1453 is not the same anymore. I will also try to give some hints on how this event, which became a collective memorial experience for the genos of the Romei, Romni, and Hellenes, was integrated in wider perspectives, expectations, successes, and failures for the Greek nation state in the 19th and 20th centuries. Professor Niehoff-Panagiotidis has already talked on this somehow. As is well known, we have 4 historiographical works in Greek by contemporaries of the events, which were written not long after these events and give us a detailed, though not identical, image on the political, social, and military framework. They also give us important information on the actions of the leaders, the soldiers, the officials, and the clergy, on the agony of the civilians, as well as on the thoughts and remarks of the scholars, and some of the writers are scholars themselves. Doukas, Georgios Frances, Kritopoulos the Impriot, and Laonikos Chalkokondyles wrote their accounts not only in Constantinople, and I think that it is an important issue. They wrote their accounts not only in Constantinople, which was at the time in Ottoman hands, but also in somehow remote places under Ottoman or Venetian rule. They have all sketched the dramatic atmosphere, the desperate efforts, the lack of cohesion in Byzantine society. We have already talked on this, on how the church union and the different attitude towards this have affected the Byzantine society. But these contemporary sources give us also information on the impetus, the steady and fruitful steps, the military advantage, and the overwhelming force of the Ottomans. So they give us a full image, which is not identical, and I find it very interesting. They have all shown how the Basilevousa, that is the reigning city, was conquered and plundered. They have also told us tragic stories of Byzantines like Lucas Notaras, and depicted the refugee movement from Constantinople to other regions, including Mistras, islands and ports under Genoese or Venetian rule, and Italy. The Byzantine writers, which now acted in a post-Byzantine framework, also included laments in their historiographical works, which mirrored at some points the respective part of Nikitas Koniates' historiography, where he dealt with the first conquest of Constantinople, that is the Latin one by the Crusaders in 1204. The Basilevousa has taken the name and role of a New Jerusalem. Its inhabitants represent what has remained from the Genos of the Hellenes, whereas the day of the fall is characterized as a Martis Dies, that is Tuesday. Interestingly enough, in the work of Kritopoulos, a comparison between the two conquests, the conquest of 1204 and the fall of 1453, comes up. In this comparison, which is really interesting, the Latin conquest is presented as an event that did not have civilian casualties and did not produce the definite political death of Byzantium as a result, in contrast to the fall of 1453. It's true that the second didn't happen because of the actions which had been made in Asia and elsewhere, but this comparison shows that in the 15th century, the casualties and the catastrophe of 1204 had faded away in the thought of some Byzantines, especially when they were called to compare them to the disastrous results of the recent fall. We also possess valuable accounts by non-Byzantines, such as the Venetian doctor Niccolò Barbaro and the Roman Catholic bishop of Mytilene, Leonardo, the Russian chronicle of Nestor Iskender, and Turkish chronicles. Not surprisingly, soon afterwards, many verse laments appeared and spread widely in the former Byzantine regions in Asia Minor, Pontus, and the Balkans. The Greeks under Turkish domination created a rich series of folk songs and traditions, which referred with great nostalgia to the lost city, the polis, its last Christian emperor, Constantine Palaiologos, and the iconic Hagia Sophia. All these ideological components were reflected in literary texts and manifested in various performances, which gave encouragement to the Greeks and helped them preserve their national sentiment and the idea of a national restoration. A national restoration which would not only include Constantinople, but would certainly have it as its center. And I think that it is an important issue. This position of Constantinople at the center of these expectations. Various rich traditions refer to the last Byzantine emperor as the Marmaromenos Vasilias, or alternatively, as the Kapetan Apethandos. His sword and his tomb are at the center of other important traditions. Traditions regarding the semi-fried fish at Vallukli, angels transferring the message of the fall and the resurrection of the city, all these two at once. But also the cypress of Misra give us all these a clear image of the emotional, intellectual, and spiritual atmosphere of this period. The ecumenical idea of Byzantium did not really end in 1453. The Orthodox Church, as an ark and protector of the Genos, continued to inspire and act as a paradigm throughout the Christian East. The Orthodox Patriarchate of Constantinople was able to support the Orthodox populations under the Ottoman rule, enabling them to keep their faith and their ambitions or expectations. The Greek nation state, which emerged from the revolution of 1821, gradually included Byzantium as a vital component of its national ideology. And from 1844 onwards, incorporated the nostalgia towards Constantinople and Hagia Sophia in the general strategic conception of Megali Idea. The result would be no less than a reversion of the event of May the 29th of 1453. This event, which acted as a source of collective trauma for Hellenism over centuries. We have many traces in literature of this trauma and this expectation for a resurrection and this reversion of this event. The catastrophe of 1922 gave a tragic end to this idea, this Megali idea. The popular verses, «Σώπασε κυρα δέσποινα και στις κόνες μη κλαίτε, πάλε με χρόνους με καιρούς, πάλε δικά σας είναι», which powerfully expressed expectations and aspirations in the framework of the ideas and the conception of the Megali Idea, had now to be replaced by something different after 1922. In a single song, two verses like «Στο γαλατά θα πιω κρασί, στο πέρα θα μεθύσω και μέσα από το γεντίκουλε κοπέλα θα αγαπήσω», which represent ideas totally compatible with the Megali Idea. The response is given by the verses of the chorus, which express the new era, the differentiated one, in which the treaties have given an end to this three. Έχε για Παναγιά, τα μιλήσαμε, όνειρο ήτανε, τα λησμονήσαμε. Thank you so much for your attention.
Yeah, thank you so much. Let me ask you a simple question. In terms of what happened in 1453 versus what happened in, even though they're two different centuries, in 1204, which was the most traumatic? Forgetting about the literature and all the rest of that, how we equate everything to 1453. What was the trauma of 1204?
A very interesting question. I believe that it was a general trauma, this of 1204, and we have this movement of refugees going out of Constantinople and other Latin-occupied lands to find a more free territory, if that was possible. But as we could see, for some people in the 15th century, this memory had already faded away. But we do know from accounts about the 1204 catastrophe, this trauma, that it was a general one, and that we had an impact on the people. We had destructions of monuments. We had many people who had to make a new life again, to begin a second life after 1204 in different ways, in different regions, trying to make different ties with other people. And we do know that nothing was the same after 1261. I mean, even after this this liberation, as the Nayscians called it, of Constantinople, nothing was the same. So it was a dramatic, this was really a dramatic change. But it is not so easy for someone to compare these conquests. Someone could see that the conquest of 1204 gave this field for the reactions towards the Union dialogue for many Byzantines. Many could not forget that the Latins had conquered Constantinople. And I believe that in the famous words of Lucas Notaras, that he preferred to see a Turkish fakiolion in the city, in comparison with a Latin tiara, we could see this memory of the dramatic events of 1204. Of course, memory is not always the best way to find solutions for the present and the future, but we could see this trauma, was a general one, and that it had an impact everywhere in the Byzantine world.
Even though, in my mind, it's the Great Lie, but they talk about the so-called Great Schism between Orthodox Christianity and, let's say, Roman Catholicism. The reality is that 1204, the Fourth Crusade, was in fact the Great Schism, wasn't it? Or am I incorrect on this?
I believe that this was the fatal event for this, but it is also important that after these events, we have soon afterwards the dialogues for the Union. Soon after 1204, and I think that it is an important issue, that it is a schism, but we have also attempts to overcome this schism.
Well, there were attempts, and even after the so-called Great Schism, I think within churches they did in fact recognize the other bishops, whatever, of Rome and other places. But really, after 1204 is when they stopped doing that in churches. Am I wrong on this or no?
They think that it is something which is accomplished. It is complete, this schism, and they try to overcome it. Whereas before 1204, I believe that they tried to ignore it, or both sides tried to act as if there wasn't any real schism. After 1204, no one could ignore it or try to pretend that it was not there.
A different conversation, but at some point we have to discuss the Latins in the Levant, let's say by Miller or what have you. But many people don't realize in Hellas, that period when in fact the Peloponnesus and other parts of Hellas were controlled by the West, where we had Latin knights, we had the Knights of the Moria, we had tournaments in Corinth, et cetera, which is also a fascinating thing when we talk about Hellas and its history. For some reason, we skip over that part of history, which I think was very significant. A different conversation. With that, Marina,
if I may say something on this, I believe that it has to do with this thing that we don't really deal with these issues. Has to do that it does not really correspond with the general idea of national historiography of this Turkish occupation everywhere and this resurrection towards the Ottoman occupation. So it is not compatible to this scheme. That's what I believe.
Yeah, you may be correct. I mean, the other thing we don't discuss in 1261 that in fact, when they went into the Moria, et cetera, Laconia, they also brought Turkish troops with them. In other words, the Turks were actually supporting the Romi, during some of these conquests, back, into those areas. Anyway, with that, Marina, would you like to introduce, and we'll discuss that further in another occasion, I think. Would you like to introduce Professor
Alexiou? Professor Nicholas Alexiou was born in Volos, Greece, where he studied economics. He has received a master's in sociology from the Queen's College City University in New York and a PhD in sociology from the Graduate Center at the City University of New York. He has taught at the Department of Sociology in Queen's College since 1990 and received the President's Award for Excellence in Teaching. His fields of interest are social and political sociology, ethnic studies, and research. He has established the first archive, library, museum for the Greeks of New York and is the Director of Research at the Hellenic American Project, HAP, at Queen's College. Also a contemporary poet, he is the author of 6 books of poetry. Many of his poems have been published in Greek and American journals and anthologies. He is the member of the Greek Authors Association in Greece and the Greek American Writers Guild Association of New York, and a director at the East Mediterranean Business Cultural Alliance. Thank you, Nico, for joining us today. Are you there? Please welcome Nico.
Of course, I'm here, and thank you very much for this invitation. Of course, as member of a hub of an EMBCA in particular, I'm very pleased that between you, Marina, and of course our president Katsos, we're able to continue our efforts to provide and organize important panels like this and have all these distinguished scholars among us. Really very fascinating discussion so far. So I'm trying to adjust my short presentation based on what we heard, and we'll try to see how we're going to do this with the help of Mr. Konstantinos. Thank you very much, Constantine, for helping us today. The title I decided to have, it is The Fall. After all, it was an announcement of a foretold death. As we know, and you know better than anybody else, I guess, that all empires fall from within, right? And that was one of the biggest problems. And we see how Hellenism managed to endure and survive under foreign occupation, which is a very important issue of our history of Hellas. As we said, and we heard so far, that is nothing new, that the Frankish penetration to the east started much earlier, before the fall, from the first crusade. And the result of the crusade was that capture of territories of the Byzantine Empire. So many years before 1453, we have captures of various territories, and those territories were either 100% Greek or Hellenic, or at least populated mainly by Hellenes. In 1192, during the Third Crusade, for example, we had the establishment of the Kingdom of Cyprus, and in 1204, the Fourth Crusade, as we said before, finally was the first fall of the Constantinople. And I'm glad that in our panel mention issues like that, because we don't know much about, or we don't want to know much about the occupation by the Venetians or the Franks. In the next slide, we see that the empire was divided already before the Turks. A few examples, there's a lot of them, but I'm mentioning only a few. That Constantinople and Thrace became the Frankish Empire of Constantinople in this particular period. In Macedonia was renamed the Kingdom of Thessaloniki. In the Peloponnese, of course, we had the Despotato to Moreos, the Principality of Moreos, which was the most important Venetian center. And of course, in central Greece, we have various ducata and baronies. So you see that since 1204, we have occupations, taking of territories, etc. Next, we're going to see an early conception of national unity, and this is what is really important for me as a sociologist, since we had historical and archaeological presentations so far. I focus on one hand, the dismantling of the empire, but this particular traumatic experience did not bring about the dismantling of Hellenism, and especially under Palaiologos and the recovery of Constantinople. It managed to last for 2 centuries at least, more. And this is a new ideological shift from the idea of the empire to a national idea. And this is very important, I think. In the eve of the fall, the Hellenic or the Greek ideology was separated from the idea of the Roman, but the idea of the empire was still very strong and alive. But now it had a Hellenic meaning. For me, it is very interesting to the realization that the Hellenic element, which was surrounded by foreign and most of the times very as enemies, neighbors and other people, managed to develop a deeper consciousness of the self. The Greeks realized more and more, and that was very useful later for the War of Independence, but more and more it was the oklektos laos, the selected people, but not in the sense of the Jewish people, because the Jewish people were selected by God. Now, the selected people, as in the case of Greeks, of Hellenes, it was selected by history and by language and culture. And this is a big difference. Both the Greek and the Jewish diasporas around the world all these centuries, we are the only people who can carry this word diaspora in the full meaning. The word Hellene takes for the first time a new meaning. Until then, the meaning to be a Hellene, it was an indication that someone is a pagan or a non-Christian. And for the first time, in the years before and after the fall, we have the rebirth of the classical spirit and the significance of the political and cultural tradition. Of course, we know that Protos Ethnarchis, right, the person, or Gennadius, who was considered among the first people who spoke about the ethnos, he managed to connect Greece and the Greek Empire under the concept of Christianity. And I'm very glad that during our panel, the professor managed to bring about the issue of the church, which is very, very important. Of course, we now, Greece is the only European country without an official separation between the state and the church. And all this is connected with the Byzantine Empire, the fall, etc. As we said, that the fall, it didn't just happen. The Turks were the last to attack. One of the most striking issues for me, it was Katagouzinos, who even asked the Turks to come for help in 1354. And of course, after that, many cities and territories were captured, and all ended until around 1715, when the Turks captured all the Greek lands, except, of course, the Ionian islands, which remain under Venetian occupation. Finally, I want to stress two points. I think we skipped one. Yeah, I want to stress the point of the Hellenic resistance. Of course, the Christian idea united with the early seeds, the national idea, which was mostly mixed with Orthodoxy, created resistant movements before and after the fall. And this is to realize that against the myth or the dominant knowledge that people have about the Greek War of Independence. And I mention that because recently we celebrated the 200th anniversary. It wasn't that the Greeks did not do anything for all these years. On the contrary, they had a lot of rebellions, sometimes spontaneous, sometimes more organized, especially by Western powers, especially the Crusades. An example among thousands of examples, it is the famous naval battle of Lepanto. 5,000 Hellenes participated in that battle, and they were enlisted in the Venetian Navy. So my concluding remarks, because I would like to ask to open the floor for a more constructive discussion, is that among other things, I would like to mention and stress the rebellious character that governs Greek history before and after the fall. And the second important thing, I think, is to realize something that is still in progress, the role of the foreign factor, how the foreign powers play a very strong and direct, sometimes and more, other times more indirect role in regulating the evolution of Hellenism. That exists until our days. And although the confusion of the national idea and Byzantium becomes more evident after the fall, the dream of ethnogenesis, of the rebirth of the Hellenized Byzantine Empire, and all these things that happen, associating the national idea, making the connections with Christian Orthodoxy through the church and the Hellenized Empire. We know many examples of that. Yerenis, for example, is a very good example with his very prophetic clarity. He managed to distinguish and talk about the geographical and ethnographic basis of the Hellenic ethnic area. And of course, his student, Halkokondylis, continue to that direction. And it was a mistake for the empire to keep for so long and support the Roman element instead of being more Greek. I think we should keep those few things in my conclusion to continue our discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nico. I would say in the Battle of Lepanto, there were 5,000 maybe Hellenes with the Venetians, but I would say there was probably more with the Turks on their ships. I could be wrong, but I think they were on both sides. I don't think they were on just one side. And in terms of you and I have spoken obviously about Rigas Fereos. When we were talking about the Romii, obviously, Rigas never used the word Hellenist. I don't believe. I think he used the word Romii, and he was talking about the people of the so-called Byzantine Empire, or the Romans. Okay, the Romii. As you know, I don't like the word Byzantine anyway because it never existed. There was never people who called themselves Byzantine. So that's a word that sort of like is disturbing to me. Yeah. But this concept of ethnicity, you know, that really did not play into Rigas. You know, he was thinking of the Romii, actually, the multi-ethnic, multicultural, you know, empire at one time. I think, Nico. Am I wrong?
Yeah, no, the Balkan democracy. Yeah, he thought of a unified area there, and I'm very glad that more and more the countries of the Balkan Peninsula are now entering Europe, because that will help the region, which is very misunderstood and very traumatized all these centuries, to show itself. I think we go to the right direction. And as far as
since you mentioned Riga, we may think that those nations traumatized us to begin with.
Yes. Professor Panagiotidis said about if it was another alternative for the church. All right, I understand that. It was either the heroic resistance that probably would be a massacre, or what actually did, but also after the War of Independence, after the establishment of the Greek state, the church needs now in the period of peace and understanding and scientific knowledge to reinstate some of the heroes, or for example, Rigas Fereos. So it is always something for the church can do now. Maybe then it wasn't an alternative, but now it's time, I think, to reinstate right, people who were, for as many, was excluded. Anyway.
Okay, let's open a discussion to questions. Marina, I think you had a couple of questions that you'd like to ask. If you can, it would be great of the panelists.
Well, I'm interested in the psychological elements, and also the intelligence, the spying that was going on, and also psychologically how the victory was impacted by natural phenomenon on Hagia Sophia, for example, on the dome and the moon and all of these sort of signs and omens. I think there's a lot of myth and legend around this. So I'm wondering if anyone wants to talk about the psychological or the intelligence in terms of how that impacted the fall.
It's open to anyone who wants to respond. I mean, please.
Well, Philippides, in the sources that he describes, if you pick up his book on Constantine, you'll find that Constantine thought he was born under ill omens. And Philippides talks about sources during the siege and during that time, phenomenon like the ones that you're talking about, eclipses, omens, etc., that impacted on people's psychology. So there was a general sense of foreboding based on the sources that Philippides has investigated and makes available to us through his notes. I'm sure my colleagues have a similar documentation that they've looked at.
Let me ask you guys a question, because you're the historians. I'm just curious about certain things. One of the things I'm curious about is Mehmet II himself. Do his records actually exist? What he thought, what he felt, what he wrote, or they didn't? Because I almost sense that Mehmet did not have this animosity against Hellenes or Orthodox or what have you that we see today in some of the rhetoric that we have from the modern state of Turkey or the Turkish Republic, because they themselves have created, I think, a mythology that perhaps did not exist. Am I wrong on this?
No, you are right, Louis, in this. Mehmet was not anti-Greek, and he knew Greek, by the way. He spoke Greek very well, and he also spoke Serbian. Mehmet was convinced that he was the elect of God and the follower and fulfiller of Alexander the Great. And this is an eternal error. The Ottoman Empire was not very Turkish.
Exactly.
Well, Mehmet, his great grandson Suleiman was writing poetry in Farsi. The language of spirituality, of jurisprudence was Arabic. Now we have even documents by Mehmet assigning land to churches, or to mosques. And still, for example, there is a document in Aios Pavlos in Mount Athos, which is a Vakfnameh, in a Vakufi, This is in Arabic. It's not in Turkish. It's not even in Ottoman. Not many people in Greece know this, Even an averagely educated modern Greek knows sufficiently ancient Greek to read, say, the New Testament or something, because we have the church who guarantees this. This in Turkey does not exist. If you want a religious education, you have to learn Arabic, which is very difficult for a Turk. And the young generation here in Turkey, they cannot even understand the texts of the 50s. It is so incredible for a Greek that if you know that they cannot read Ottoman is another issue, but that they cannot even read the classical Turkish literature of Orhan Veli or Orhan Kemal, even Nazım Hikmet for them is difficult. This is such a cultural break, which is very difficult for us to assess. And cultural breaks are normally always the backdoor for nationalism.
Well, when we talk about nationalism, Turks, Turkey for the Turks and all the rest of that. I mean, the reality is these are more recent scenarios. Am I wrong on this?
Yeah.
And in terms of Mehmet, the city was obviously depopulated, but if I'm not mistaken, Mehmet actually recolonized Constantinople with a lot of Hellenes from all over, what is currently the
mostly
Hellenic,
Peloponnesus.
Mostly in the Peloponnesus. That's absolutely correct.
Sure.
Lou, you might be interested to know that there is a Turkish-produced film that presents Mehmet in a very positive light, and both Marius Philippidis and Tom Papadimitriou, who's written on this period, both appear in the film.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's current, or what is it? What is that?
Yeah, you can. I saw it on the History Channel.
Okay, I find this fascinating. I find this fascinating. We open it up to any questions of anybody on the panel. Just open it up. Any?
Yeah, just one detail, maybe, or one major issue and one detail. The major issue: modern Turkish nationalism is more influenced by German Romanticism of the late 19th century than from Ottoman times. The Ottomans were not nationalists, not at all. No,
we hear of what's his name, Ziga Gökalp.
And by the way, Ziya Gökalp was Kurdish.
Right, but what's fascinating is he created a lot of this nationalistic, material.
Of course, this national mythology, of course.
And what's fascinating to me is we have this discussion, especially recently, not recently, but continuously, relating to the genocide, the Christian genocide of the different periods. And for whatever reason, I bring it up all the time, but nobody wants to talk about Ziga and what took place with regards to his philosophy and the influence that he had on Kemal and all the rest of them.
Of course,
and the rise of Turkish nationalism, which was contrary probably to the way the Ottomans viewed the other people within their empire, who they thought were part of their empire. They were part of their people.
One other detail is for Professor Alexiou. Mistra was not Venetian. Mistra was French.
Yes.
It was the family of the Villers-Ardoin, who also wrote an eyewitness account of the conquest of 1204. For this, I recommend for all of you, if you didn't read it,
the Chronicle of the Moria.
I Principessa Isabeau.
Oh,
it's a novel.
Angelos Terzakis.
I have a question for Elia, if that's okay. I'm a big fan of Bessarions. Since you've done a study of Bessarion, what did Bessarion say about the fall? I'm sure it's buried somewhere in Philippidis' tome, but it doesn't immediately come to mind. How did he react, and what did he say?
Bessarion did not.
Was already in Italy.
He did not forget his. He did not forget Byzantium. What he thought appropriate to do is try to find a new Constantinople, something which resembled Constantinople, and he found Venice as a city which would resemble Constantinople. And of course, he did not forget his fatherland, Trebizond. He was very sad when he heard the news of the conquest of Constantinople and the conquest of Trebizond, and he was part of this attempt for a crusade and for the reconquest of Constantinople, which did not succeed, of course. He had this activity for this crusade. This crusade on behalf of the Christians as a whole. He remained steady in his choice for one faith, and one Christianity. So he remained steady to what he had declared himself in Florence.
Thank you.
But Bessarion, he was obviously in Venice. He did leave his library there, if I'm not mistaken, which is very famous. I don't know if anybody's looked at his library. I haven't.
I did. Yeah,
Oh,
I did work.
Oh,
I visited it when I was in Venice this summer.
Yeah.
was it fascinating? I mean, was it?
Yeah, I mean, they had as part of the Congress, they had a exhibit. Perhaps my two colleagues were there as well.
I see.
I have two questions, so one for Ilias and one for Constantine. Ilias, because the Ionian Islands, they were under the Venetians, not the Ottoman Turks. What is your assessment? How they received the fall and the occupation, the Turkish occupation in the rest of Greece, let's say? How that was received? Was support? Was some kind of let's say understanding? You can give me an idea how the Ionian Islands received that. And Constantine, because I met Aguilarakis a few years ago, and I actually sent a couple of my students to his excavations in the summer camp that they had in Katsos. And he gave us a tour also in Adelphi. Is it still going on? And what happened to all this? I remember they had the laboratory in Adelphi.
Well,
I don't know.
The laboratory still exists. He was doing excavations in Crete. He's done excavations in Thassos as well, where he found a Byzantine archer and wrote about the medical technology that the skeleton shows. But he's no longer taking students to, as of this summer, he's no longer taking students to Crete to do excavations. But I'll give him your regards. I speak to him on a weekly basis. He's a good friend, and constantly gives me new information. I'm going to get up for a moment and ask about a book that I bought recently that I think is relevant to Professor Alexiou's presentation. Hang on a second.
Yeah, but Ilias, we're waiting for your assessment.
If I may give a short answer to this very interesting question, I believe that the Ionian Islands were a pioneer in this attempt for. This is the book, the Byzantine Hellenic.
I saw it and I bought it recently. I just perused it. I haven't read it yet, but it relates both to your field and to the development of Hellenic identity, which Kaldelis has written so much about. And it relates to what you were talking about.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Constantine.
What do you think of it, Ilias? I assume you've read it, and I don't know. Yanni may have read it as well.
It's very interesting. I believe it's very interesting. It's on Theodoros II Laskaris, who represents this Greekness in Nicaea. Of course, before him, Theodoros I and John Vatazis are on the same stand regarding Greekness. I was trying to give a short answer to the question, to Nicholas' question about the Ionian. It is surprising that they were really pioneers in this attempt for these national ideas. And we have, for example, Zambelius, who acts there. And he gives this this scheme and this conception of continuity, which was really new in Greece. It had appeared some years before in Germany, but it was totally new to Greece. And because the Ionian Islands were nearer to the west than the other regions, and because of the Venetian conquest, they could give these ideas to the rest of Greece. And of course, we have Solomos, and you can see and Capodistria. So they were really pioneers in this construction of the new nation state, to which they did not have. They were not part at the beginning. It's somehow surprising, and I'm trying to reconstruct it in a way, and we're trying in the Ionian University to give these insights on how the Ionian Islands and people.
Good that you have Ottoman studies on the Ionian Islands.
We have Ottoman studies by Professor Alexiou, Sophia Alexiou. Yeah. Yes.
And this is good because it is not common in Greek university to have Ottoman studies.
It's a choice for the Department of History in the Ionian University to have Ottoman history and other somehow peculiar for the Greek concepts histories. For example, we have American history, which is not common in Greek university.
Very uncommon.
And Asian history, which is not really common. So we're trying to make it in a new way. We're trying to do so.
I think when you have Ottoman history, it's part of Hellenic history. You know, so it's kind of important.
Hellenic history without the Ottoman period.
Okay.
Because the wise administration of the University of Ioannina gave up Arabic and Ottoman. They do not have it anymore.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Unfortunately. I have a question for Ioannis. My recollection, and correct me if I'm wrong, after the Doukas, didn't the Ottomans conquer and hold for a period of time the Ionian Islands? Or am I?
Yeah, very short. Yeah, very short.
I seem to recall we have a Mufassal Defter for the Ionian Islands. So it's often said that the Ottomans never conquered the Ionian Islands, but they did for a period of time and held them.
For a few of years, and especially Lefkada, no, because Lefkada is not really separated from the mainland. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to wrap it up. So some closing comments, if we can. We'll start with Professor Hatzidimitriou. Your thoughts? Some closing comments, thoughts?
Oh, some closing comments. It's an honor to be part of such a distinguished panel, particularly since in memory of my dear friend. And there are a lot of subjects that have been brought up that I hope can be explored in future panels. And I thank you for your time and your comments.
Thank you. I would like to explore, as I said, that period of time after 1204 in the Peloponnesus in particular.
Yeah.
And what was taking place. I think that would be a fascinating discussion. I think we discussed that to really explore that, because most Hellenic people in their own nation don't even know what happened during that period.
Well, we also should give the Despotate of Epirus equal time to Nicaea.
I think so. Yanni, final thoughts, comments on today?
No, thank you for the invitations. Thank you for the many interesting comments. I think we should perhaps separate two issues: the spiritual meaning of the fall of Constantinople, and the political. To put an end to all political romanticism of reconquering. Thanks God, the majority of the Greek people do not want to reconquer Constantinople or Trapezunt or so on. And the personal bravery of the last emperor is very impressive. He could have done different. Yeah, I think also the idea of the Latinocratia is an interesting idea. Maybe one final point: the Ottoman rule, because the Ottomans normally respected the culture of the people they conquered, is different from place to place. There is not one Turkocratia in this sense. You have so many different challenges and solutions: the date of the conquest, the conditions of the conquest, no, the character of the region. No, Thessalia had a different character from Peloponnesus. Kypros has a different character from Constantinople, and so on. There is not a unified Ottoman regime in this sense. The conditions were very different.
Let me ask you a question, because that's a fascinating thing you said. We often give dates of this fell, that fell at certain time periods. But the reality is things didn't fall that quickly, unless I'm mistaken. I think there were some writings, even in the fall of the so-called Despotate of the Morea, that in fact there were other sections that did not pay taxes, and usually when someone takes over, they start to collect taxes. So there's gaps in the history, I think, unless I'm wrong.
No, you are completely right. We know this quite well. Know that for example, there were regions in the former Byzantine Empire where really Turks settled, the so-called Yörük. They were nomadic people, and many of them were Shi'i. They were not Sunni. No, they called them also Kizilbash. No, and because they were nomadic, they paid only half of the tax. No, so this is, for example, for Chalkidiki, also for Thraki. No, for in Peloponnesus, the Kotzabassi, this had special privileges from the Sultan for self-government.
Right.
This is also the origin of Icosiana. This is a very complicated subject, and I think the best is that what you said, that to bridge the gap in historical memory.
Yes, there has to be more dialogue just for the general public, because the general public.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I think most people, it's really kind of funny when we talk about the history, whether it's the revolution or anything else. Most people are clueless in terms of their history. It's just my opinion, but I could be totally wrong. Ilias, some closing comments, thoughts?
Thank you so much for the invitation and the opportunity to be part of this dialogue, which was really productive. I would like to point out a difference in the terminology that we use for these two conquests of between the Latin conquest and the Ottoman one. For the Latin conquest of 1204, we use the word conquest, Latin conquest, whereas for the Ottoman one, we very often use the term fall, which is, I think, has an ideological value. And I believe that it is how the observer each of the time and how the present makes us evaluate the past. I think it is really interesting, and I'm really glad that we had the opportunity to be together in this very interesting panel discussion in the memory of Marius Philippidis.
Well, Ilias, we certainly want to do one on Kapodisthias, as we have discussed, and we'll set it up with Nico and some others. Nico, some final thoughts, comments?
Although it is about a very sad and traumatic event, I'm very happy and pleased to be among you and have today's panel, because it is very important for us Hellenes to realize the moment of the consciousness, to regain consciousness about the Hellenic culture, and how that led to all other great events and sad events. And I am I agree 100%, very supportive of what we said today. It's very dangerous to confuse nationalism, the historical and the political. But for me, it is not about the separation. To commemorate events like the fall, it is very important because still the Hellenes ask for justice. It is about the genocide that we need to be recognized at some point from the Pontian and the Asia Minor catastrophe, which is even worse than the fall, because 3,000 years of history and continuous presence at that area, it was gone. And it is directly related to the ideologies formed before and after the fall. So we have to be careful, yes, I understand, but at the same time, the Hellenes ask for justice.
Yeah,
Thank you.
There is no direct connection between 1453 and 1923. This is completely, Mehmed II was not somebody who wanted to eradicate the Greek race.
The confusion of ideologies between empire, orthodoxy, and to regain lost territories. That was the mentality there. And it's directly related, because all the myths and fairy tales of Marmarobeno, Vasilia, etc., they came back, and it was badly used. And finally, the Greeks have to get rid of another dichotomy that we have as a society between the East and the West. Greece has many peculiarities, and one of them, which is very strong still, it is between the East and the West.
Sure.
That's a fascinating discussion, I think, that we should have going forward. I'm not sure if it's linked to 1453, but it's more recent. But it certainly ties into the mythology on both sides, and I think we have to have this discussion. And it ties in, obviously, to nationalism and all the rest of that, as was discussed earlier. Marina, some thoughts, comments?
Yes, I'm honored, and it's been a pleasure to be part of this panel. Dr. Marios Philippidis can be seen on Netflix on Rise of Empires, Ottoman, in Mehmed versus Vlad, which is the second season. The first season is the conquest of Constantinople. And in memory of Dr. Philippidis, I would say that we have to remove the word Byzantine and claim the Greek-Roman Empire, which is, really what we're talking about, and our identity as Romans. And so, friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. We were Romans. I think that's important to mention, and also to remember that when a professor passes away, a library dies. And we lost a great resource in knowledge of the Greek world with Dr. Marios Philippidis, and I hope that his work will continue. There is so much left undone by his untimely passing, and I hope that we can continue his scholarship and his legacy. So thank you for inviting me, and it was a real pleasure and honor to be part of it. Thank you, Lou.
Marina, thank you so much, and thank you to all the panelists today for this fascinating discussion, which will only lead to other discussions, because every time we meet, we can talk for hours, actually, on these issues, and certainly they spin off into other thoughts. To the audience, going forward, we have a few other events coming up. In June, we're going to have the 4th Hellenic Energy Independence Forum on June 18th. On June 25th, we're going to have In Search of James Williams, the African-American former slave who fought in the Hellenic Revolution, and who is a hero of the revolution. But in the last few months, the last year, people have gone into the mythology, just like mythologies are created about the fall of Constantinople. There's a lot of mythologies that have been created about James Williams. So In Search of James Williams will be about trying to eliminate some of the disinformation that's taking place recently, in probably the last year or so. And then August the 6th, we're going to have the legacy of Cleopatra, the seventh Philopator, and we're going to have that discussion on the anniversary of her passing on August the 10th of 30 BC. So that should be a fascinating discussion. And Nico, I'm not sure if we want to do this or anybody on the panel, but the 100 years of the Treaty of Lausanne is coming up. It ties into some of the things we were talking about recently. And I believe that treaty was, if I'm not mistaken, July 26th. Am I wrong or no?
Yeah, especially now that the Turkish government refuses to recognize it.
Well, you know, that's an interesting discussion because there's nothing in the treaty that says that it has an expiration date of 100 years, which is another mythology. Listen, thank you all for being panelists today. Thank you, Marina, for co-moderating the panel, and thank you to the audience. Thank you, guys. Great to see you again.
Thank you a lot for the invitation. See you.
No, thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Good summer, everybody.
Kalinichta.
Καλή νύχτα.